So hi everybody. Again, sorry for the delay, but we're in for Parallel Skills Workshop number 4. So what we are talking about today, and just give me a second to close my blinds because I look rather illuminated otherwise. Okay, what we're talking about today, what I would like to bring closer to you is the topic of technical modeling versus economic feasibility. It's a topic we've stumbled across in the last couple of years. Which seems to be more and more of an issue that when it comes to technical modeling, there is a strong incentive to have a very strong focus on technical parameters and disregard economic parameters. So when especially at universities or at very theoretical institutes, once you develop a solution that is technical feasible and you try to bring it to the market, or you try to find a suitable feasible business case for that, you simply fail because you neglected some basic economic figures, some basic economic numbers. And with this session, I just want to give you a first heads up and a first food for thought on how to approach that issue and how to tackle that issue, and have some economic aspects in also technical modeling. So we're going to do 3 things today. I hope we can do everything. So first up, I will discuss the general topic, the general issue of that specific topic. The next part will be that I will show you how a business model canvas or a business model building approach will help you to get into the mindset of actually doing economic modeling as well. And then finally, I will give you a first glimpse into the whole value chain process that is necessary for more complex models to also consider the economic part. So again, for all those who joined right now, there will be possibilities to ask questions. So either use the chat. Amanda from RGI will be more than happy to relate the chat to me, as I don't see the chat at the moment due to presenting. Also, you can simply unmute yourself when you have a question, but I would like to ask to wait for the question slides. There are some question slides in there to really unmute yourself, then we can discuss the topics. So let's get to the most important things. Who am I? No, just kidding, I'll keep that short. Where do I have my expertise from? I'm a researcher at Forward Energy in Austria. We're a small research company who do a lot of energy related research, mostly in the field of electricity and heat. So electricity grid, heat grid, electricity appliance, and so on and so forth. But we're not a university. We are not university related. So we are mostly focused on hands-on research and hands-on simulation. So we often work with companies who don't necessarily need to have the most detailed technical models of stuff, but rather a more higher level approach, but considering all the economic aspects in the background. So for instance, if we want to introduce a new technology in an energy system, what effects would that have on all the different entities in the energy system from an economic and technical perspective? So we don't have the time to actually go into very deep detail when it comes to technologies, but we also have more of a techno-economic modeling approach. So just a brief glimpse, that's our team. We're 9 people at the moment, so a rather small team. And just to keep things rather short, there's the main topics we're involved in. So we have a more technical part of the company that focuses on simulation of technical components, and we have a more regulatory, legal, and economic part that also focuses on the whole background. What does the energy system or the regulatory regulations of the energy system indicate? What are business models that can be developed in that case? What are entire value chains that can be developed in that case? So in all shortness, I'm between the electrical side. I have a PhD in electrical engineering in energy economics, and so I'm in between electrical engineering and business model development and regulatory aspects. So Yeah, that's also why I would like to bring all those topics to you to just give you a bit of food for thought. So next up, there should be a Mentimeter working. Please take a look. You can go to menti.com and enter that code, or if you're there with your mobile device, you can simply take a photo of the QR code and go via the QR code. And please go to the Menti slide and see if I would like to know what your background is, just to have a feeling of where you are from and what your background concerning this topic is. So I hope you all had the chance to take to join Menti. And oh, brilliant! It seems like technology is working. So we have research, we have Spain, scientists. You could also enter your technical field if you want to. So if you're a researcher or a scientist, are you in energy research? Are you in medical research? But again, then why would you be at EMP-E? But doesn't matter, you somehow stumbled across that. Okay, we have techno-economic analysis. That's brilliant. So we have energy, physics. Okay. All right. Energy system analysis. Brilliant. So we have quite a few backgrounds, especially whoever is from techno-economic analysis. You can then ask the more critical questions later on, and also give me your input. So research management, interesting. Okay. Electrical engineering. Brilliant. Okay, so and the next part I would like to ask you again with a Mentimeter, and since you're all quite proficient with that already, it looks like, please just tell me why you're here today. Just a brief indication. So is it to get some general knowledge, to get more detailed expertise, just out of curiosity? Just hit me with why you're here today. I'll leave up that slide for a couple of seconds more, so you can easily join the Mentimeter. And as soon as that's done, I will go to the next slide. And let's see, there should be something going on there. Just give me a second. So I need to see if there's a problem with the slide. That one's working. Okay, there is information coming in. Okay, so broad knowledge, that's good. We have business models, brilliant. So we have 2 people currently joining. Okay, general business development. All right. Okay, there are topics here. Oh, that's good. So far there is I can satisfy all your needs. That's brilliant. Business decision making should also be there. Business model support. Okay, yeah. So I should be able to help you with most things. Modeling in general, okay, yeah, I will have some parts of that as well, but very rudimentary only, so rather superficial. I will not present too complex models today, because that would have been too much for the day, even if I had 1.5 hours of presentation time. But nevertheless, I will try to give you some insight in how to introduce economic numbers into business models as well, but on a rather superficial level. But nevertheless, we can go into more details after the session, so you can stay for a couple of more minutes and I can give you some hints on how to do that. All right. So why are we here today? So basically, what we've seen in the last couple of years is that there's a strong conflict between technical optimization and technical simulation and economic parameters. More often than not, in technical models, technical feasibility is the main aspect we're going for. So can we reduce, or can we increase the efficiency? Can we reduce the losses? Can we reduce the uptake from the public grid for electricity, for instance? Can we reduce downtimes of machines? Can we increase storage capacity? Stuff like that. Those are very, very common questions at the moment. But the problem is, just because we've increased the efficiency, just because we have built a very nice large storage somewhere, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually better. because there are more factors than just the technical parameters in there. And even if we go for a simple installation costs and operational costs, so fixed costs and variable costs approach, OPEX, CAPEX, that doesn't necessarily paint the whole picture. Especially in the energy systems, we have very strong interlinks between different companies. So in Austria, for instance, we have 9 large energy suppliers, one in each county, and they have a multitude of different smaller companies underneath one roof. So if you develop a new technology, implement a new technology, it might be good for one of the companies, but it might be a big downside for all of the other companies. So things are getting more complicated. So a simple increase of efficiency on the technical side might have a cascading effect on the economic side, which should, at least to some degree, be considered if you want technologies to be implemented in the market. And then again, economic feasibility alone is not always the key parameter. We're in an energy transition, so there's a new mindset that people would also, to some degree, accept higher costs if it suits the environment, if it helps a generation approach that future generations will be able to also have a prosperous life. This is somewhat theoretical because even if we ask people if it's okay if things cost more, most of them will say yes, just because otherwise they would sound bad. But when it comes to the real decision of investment, most of the time it still is hard cash that's counting. And it all comes down, and this is something you should remember, it all comes down to perspective and boundaries. So what is the scope you're looking at? Are you simply asked to increase the efficiency of a device, and that's that, so you don't have to care about any economic parameters? That's fine. Then that's the question you need to answer. But as soon as you go for a more broader perspective and a more holistic approach, you always need to consider more factors. And that's something I would like to just give you a nudge to today. So what are the specifications? So for technical optimization, from my perspective, the goal is always have a most detailed model, a most detailed simulation or optimization of a technical component. So you want to have as many parameters in there as possible, as many screws and wheels which you can turn to increase the degree of detail of the model, so you can best possibly describe the technical surrounding and the real world. And when you go for the performance of those technical models or the performance of the things you're trying to optimize, let's say, for instance, you are trying to size, which will be an example later on, you're trying to size a PV generator for a simple household. This is, from a technical point of perspective, what could be your KPIs? Your KPIs could be very technical driven. It could be efficiency. It could be lifetime operational cycles in case of a PV generator. It could be the amount of energy or the autarky rating of your building. So how independent are you from the public grid? How much of your energy supply or energy demand do you supply yourself? Or it could be the own consumption rating. So how much of the electricity you use, you generate, you use yourself. And that's within boundaries. And that's very technical. And you could use a very detailed model of a PV generator, considering the inclination, considering the type of materials you're going to use, and so on and so forth, so that you know exactly how much of those technical parameters you are going to consider. Mostly, you will assume technologies without considering the cost, and that happens to me all the time. So that's something that's like, okay, yeah, you want to look at the new technology. Yeah, how large would that be? Let's calculate it. Okay, well, we're decreasing the CO2 footprint by 20%. We are increasing own consumption by 15%. Well, that seems to be the best idea I've ever had. And as soon as somebody asks me, okay, and how much does that cost? Like, no clue, haven't thought about it, just did the model, and we're good to go. But reality, sadly, is different. So you will, for which I will use a very simple model and a simple approach. So I will stop sharing my screen for the presentation and I will go to Jupyter Notebook. You can, if you want to, we will send out the Jupyter Notebook after the presentation. So you can also use that. Again, there's nothing too fancy in there, just some rather simple calculation. Okay, you should be able to see my screen any moment now. Just a second. So that should be good to go. You should be seeing my screen. Brilliant. Okay, Amanda, thumbs up. Brilliant. Okay, so what we're doing is basically, and I will just go over the code so you can later on see the code as well. The code was created in Python. It's really nothing fancy, nothing special, just a simple code for implementing, calculating the data. So what we're doing is we're importing the necessary libraries from Python. We're importing the data. I've prepared some data in the background, which is the load profile of a single household with about 3,500 kilowatt hours consumption per year, sorry, and also some global irradiation data for an Austrian spot. The next thing we're going to do, just so you can see, I'm just plotting the data for the household, which is quarter hour values from a standardized load profile. So it is really an average value for households, nothing too fancy there. But you can see we have a lower consumption rating in summer and a higher consumption in winter time. So this household will most likely have some electrical heating in there, so that that explains the higher consumption values. So the next thing we're going to do, and again, this is really short. We're just developing our different arrays we're going to need for our sizing loop of the PV generator. What we are creating is the electricity or the energy taken from the grid. We're creating an array for the in-feed into the grid, and also we're creating an array for own consumption and autarky. All of them we will be simulating 150 different PV sizes. So we will have one of the values for each of the PV sizes. What I'm going to do then in the next field is we're going to run the basic simulation. So what this does is nothing else than increase the PV generation capacity by 1 kilowatt peak each cycle. During each cycle, we will calculate the PV generation profile. As you can see, this is a rather simplistic formula where we take two efficiency factors and multiply the global irradiation data with the installed PV capacity to get the PV generation for each quarter hour. The database is 2018, I think. And then we're going to calculate the residual load, so how much surplus is per quarter hour or how much grid uptake is per quarter hour, and then we calculate the power taken from the grid and the power fed into the grid per quarter hour, sum that up nicely to get the energy. And then we will calculate the own consumption factor and the autarky rating for this building. So as I mentioned, this is nothing too fancy in terms of modeling, but it is a good approach. So here, this is the part where technical modelers will and can go nuts, because calculating the PV power from the global irradiation can be as simple as this formula, but you could also have a multitude of different parameters in there with the outside temperature, which affects the efficiency of the PV modules, then the temperature of the inverter, and stuff like dust on the panels, aging of the panels, angle of the sun, and angle of the PV generator, and so on and so forth. So you could really go bananas here, but this is rather simple for purposes, for educational purposes. So, and finally, this is the interesting part when it comes to showing you the technical parameters. So we have on the top part, on the top diagram, we have the own consumption rating, and on the bottom part, we have the autarky rating. Own consumption rating is how much of the energy you produce in the PV generator you consume yourself. So own consumption rating of 1 would mean that all the energy you produce in your PV generator really is used in your household. Whereas a value of 0 means that none of the energy you generate is used directly in the household. The autarky rating itself indicates how much of your consumption, of your annual consumption, you can satisfy directly with your PV generation. So as you would expect, the autarky rating increases with the installed capacity, and the own consumption rating decreases with the installed capacity. But there seems to be a threshold around 45 to 50% of the autarky rating. So you cannot provide more than 45 to 50% of your own consumption. So regardless, even if you would increase the installed capacity by, let's say, to 1 megawatt, it still wouldn't be better. Again, the own consumption rating goes down. So if we were just using purely technical parameters here, I would say go for something like 100 kilowatt peak if you have the area for that, if you have the room for that. Of course, there are technical parameters that might limit that, roof size or the size of your garden, or the decision of the family that they don't want to have the whole garden covered in PV, which is a very sensible decision. But nevertheless, their purely technical parameters would rather indicate to go for a large-scale PV generation and go for use as the most of your rooftop, the most of your of the possibilities you can have to create energy. So I will stop sharing and go back to my slides. Hopefully this works. Brilliant, looks good. So if we go for a technical, if we go for a more economic perspective, we should have a strong focus on economic parameters and connections. So the important part here are the connections. Economic parameters can be quite easily introduced. I will have the same problem, the same simulation later on with some economic parameters in there that can be quite easily, but it gets more complex once you draw the connections between different companies, different entities that influence one another, and that might have an effect on the decision of a technology or whatever you want to simulate. So the technical models you're using are mostly shifted to less attention to them, because they are just there to simulate the general technical dependencies, but you can go for by far less detail, because if you start considering economic aspects as well, the degree of uncertainty increases, because you don't often know all the economic parameters as well. So having a high degree of detail in the technical model creates some sort of pseudo security that your results have a high quality. And you will start using more economically driven parameters and key performance parameters. So like rate of return, amortization rates, yield, costs that you have, and so on. One important factor to consider here is just because something has a good rate of return, it does not necessarily mean that it's a feasible product, that it's a feasible solution. You always have to consider the financial capacities of somebody who you are going to develop something for has. So for instance, if you develop a solution that costs €1 million and it gets an amortization rate of 5 years, and it's a solution for households, it's very likely that you won't be able to sell many of those products because it's simply too expensive, regardless if you have the money back in 5 years. So that's something you also need to consider. It's not purely, okay, how much does it take, how long does it take to refinance something? And again, as for the technical optimization, in the economic optimization, you often purely focus on the economic parts and disregard any technical feasibilities. So I've seen many discussions on the economic side where people introduced a new technology that sounds too good to be true on an economic side, and once you ask them, okay, and how did you model the technical side? Oh well, we didn't model it at all, we assumed it. And what did you assume? That and that. Okay, that's total rubbish, you know that. And then that's the business model for that. So it's always good to have both sides, and it's often enough to have a rather simplistic version of both sides. And again, the key factor are the boundaries for the business models. Are you developing a business model purely for a small market, and you don't you don't care about what's happening on bordering markets on other companies? That's fine. If that's your task, do that. But as soon as you're in a more holistic system, you will need to consider larger boundaries. So that's it for the first part. Do you have any questions so far? Amanda, were there any questions in the chat? Okay. If not, then it seems like I'm not, A, not talking too fast, and B, everything is quite clear. So the next thing I would like to ask you is go to Menti again and show me whether or not you have had experience in techno-economic models. If you have any, if you have had any experience with that so far. Just a brief answer to that we can then simply go on with the slides. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, so we have some, okay. Brilliant. So whoever the one is that's fully considering the economic aspects, please also use this opportunity. If I've missed some points or if you disagree with me, just go for it and give me your opinion, because I think we can all appreciate the learning from other experts as well. Okay, it seems like we have someone with no experience at all, and some people include economic parameters in models, but to a very small degree. Okay, that's good, because then you're already very inclined not to do those. Okay, we have a technology here and it's super, but it will never sell a failure. Okay. Thank you for the participation. So next up is another Menti, just a quick one. So I think I missed the didn't change the title here. So this will be a Menti for the relevance of business models of relevance of business model consideration. Just give me a quick heads up on those parameters here. I will just go back to the slides once more so you have the QR code. So the task here is to just indicate how relevant you think those things I'm talking about are in a real life application. So we'll give you 1 or 2 minutes to fill it out, and then we will go for the business model approach. So I will then show you how to develop a business model canvas, and most importantly, because I think the business model canvas is something that's rather theoretical, how it will help you in modeling, because that's something I had to learn for myself. Okay. 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 That's good. That's good. Okay, so brilliant. So economic aspects play a major role. That's good, because it indicates that you will have some knowledge on the things I was talking about. Also, technical parameters are more important. That's interesting. So you would strongly suggest that technical parameters. Oh, interesting. Okay, so there was some consideration of business models, and there is some minor consideration of entire value chains. Okay, that's good. That's good. Thanks. So let's go for the business model canvas. So business model canvas is a standardized approach that can be used to define a business model, because business model itself is a very ubiquitous term, but this will help you to narrow it down a little bit more and have more precise knowledge for yourself, mainly on what a business model could be. It basically is made up of 9 fields to describe the structure within your business model. And so when we use the business model approach, we use it more of mostly in teams, so not you yourself, because it strongly lives from the perspective of many people. So I would really suggest, if you go for the business model canvas approach, that you do that with more people and approach it with a team rather than by yourself. So what's the good thing about the business model? It really comes down to, it gives you better understanding of what the business should be like. That's the main benefit of the business model. It's quite easy to fill out, actually, once you've understood it. So it's not no rocket science there. And something, since normally the business model canvas is rather limited in space, you're not allowed to formulate quite big lyrical approaches, so you should be on point. And once you're done, everything about your business should be on one page. This is rather theoretical, because it's actually not everything about your business. There's a whole lot of information that's missing in the business model canvas, which I will come to later on with the disadvantages. You should see most dependencies within the business model, and you, after filling that out, everybody involved should have a good understanding of your business, so what you're aiming for. For me personally, from a modeler's point of perspective, I kind of like the business model approach because it gives you a good indication, but it's at times very theoretical. And but the big plus points are, it helps you to think outside the box. So what it gives you a different viewpoint to technologies, a different viewpoint to approaches which you can use, and it focuses very strongly on the economic part, which helps me as a technical guy to get more into the economic part. It also helps me, that's part of it, ask some uncomfortable questions. So is there a market for what I'm doing currently? What will the buyer have from it? What will have the user have from it? What's the benefits there? So that's something that I always try to also then feed into my models to some degree. And most important parts, obviously, for me, from a modeling perspective, are the cost and income side, but that's later on. So what's the disadvantage? You neglect the environment of the business model. So you have a very strong focus on the business itself, but you don't actually focus on who are your opponents on the market, what solutions are out there, what do you have to provide to be better at than that. So you just focus on, that's your business, that's your profit you're going to generate, that's something you're going to provide others. What's not in there so much is the consideration of human resources and interactions of the team. So you have a part where that's about the key resources, but it's not indicating on what expertise your employees will have to have, where they have to work together, what problems they might occur. And but that's part of why I'm talking. It's a very strong focus on profit-oriented businesses. So if you're going for something like a non-profit organization, the business model approach, the business model canvas, is not the best tool to use. There are better tools, because you do not focus so strongly on the non-economic benefits you generate. What people say is there's a differing degree in detail in the boxes needed. That's true, but for a modeling perspective, that's not that relevant. And here's the big part: you have no clue after filling out the business models how to actually start your business. You just know, okay, you know with whom you have to work together, you know who your customers will be, you know what your value proposition is, but you have no clue at all on how to actually get your business started. So while you can use the business model canvas to get the idea of the business itself, you will need some other tools on how to identify the next steps on how to actually get your business started, how to get financing, who your main partners will be, in what order, and so on. From a personal experience, it takes some time to get used to. That's something negative, especially if you're a technically oriented person or you come from a technical background. It's quite alien to work like that. And as I mentioned, it's quite theoretical at times because not all the fields are really necessary for you in a modeling perspective. But again, it helps you to think outside the box and consider some things in modeling. And you definitely, that's something that's very important from a modeling perspective. When it comes to, for instance, a technology you're going to model, when it comes to a new energy system part you're going to model. For instance, you want to model a microgrid, for instance, and you want to simulate the behavior of different flexibilities in a microgrid so it can work completely autonomous. You will definitely need to decide whose side you're on when you take the business model, because the business model is very single point of view centric. So are you going to develop a business model for the operator of flexibilities? Are you going to develop a business model for the operator of the entire system, for the grid operator, for suppliers of electricity, and so on and so forth? So you need to be quite precise when it comes to that. And that's also one of the drawbacks of the business model. You will not be able to make one business model that suits all. So you will have to either develop different business models in order to get all the point of views, or you will have to go for a value chain approach where you then consider more parts and see how they interact with one another. So as far as for the business models themselves, are there any questions so far? Any comments? Is there anybody listening? Yeah, well, you are listening because you're filling out the Mentimeter. So, okay, this again brings me to the next slide, and this will give you the opportunity to try out if you have used a business model canvas so far. So just hit me with the next Mentimeter. Okay, we've got one yes. Okay, we've got more no's than yes so far. Yeses are catching up. I should have started giving the possibility to bet on results. Okay, let's wait for a couple more seconds. So we're 50-50. Okay, then no fraction is in the lead again. Okay. All right. We had about 7 answers in the last Mentimeters again. So business model canvas, we have 12 more minutes. So I will go over the business model canvas in brief to show you how it's done. I will not go for the. I've had planned, if we were going for the full time, to actually decide on a small business model approach and then fill out the business model together with you to get a feeling for it. But since it's already 10:18 and we should be done at 10:30, sorry again for the delay. I will just go over the parts of the business models and then indicate which are the ones that are relevant, in my opinion, for a modeling approach from a technical perspective. So we have 9 fields to be filled out: the key partners, key activities, resources, value proposition, customer relationships, customer segments, channels, cost structure, and revenue streams. So first off, when filling out the business model, start with what your actual business will be, and then you go to the customer section. So who's your customers? Who are they? Who are you going to address? Are you going to address people who have the money to buy an electric vehicle and you want to propose some new technology to them? Are you aiming for low-income households? And so on. There's a multitude of different parts which you can go for here, but you have to decide who your target is going to be, and that needs to be the first decision you're going to make, because all the other decisions you're going to have in the business model is something that relates from here. From a modeling point of perspective, and I will focus on that, is focusing on the customer helps me to decide what's possible within the model, what technologies I can assume, what technologies I can use, and what knowledge within the community of customers I can assume. So for instance, if I go for low income, or let's say, low income households with a low degree of education. So something where they will actually have to participate in order they will have to control devices is something that's off the table, because it will take a lot of time to actually get them to know solutions. So everything I propose in a technical model and I simulate will need to be low key and also low cost. So a complex smart energy management system for at home which costs 500 euros is off the table. So I need to go for other solutions. Something smart breakers that are quite cheap to use, and things like that. That's something that helps me to go for a better approach within the models. What's my value proposition? So what's the thing I actually am proposing? What's my product? What benefits do the users have from the product I am proposing? This is quite interesting to think about from a personal experience, because it helps me to formulate my target functions within the model if I go for an optimization. So if my value proposition is I will reduce your CO2 footprint, then that needs to be in the technical model. If the value proposition is I will reduce your monthly costs in electricity, that needs to be in the model. So that helps me to better formulate the models and remember which target functions I need to consider. So the channels we're going to use, the channel section is about what will be the first contact you will have with your customers. Like, is it from a flyer? Is it from personal, from mouth propaganda? Whatever. So a word of mouth is the word. So whatever media outlets you're going to use. That's something from a modeling perspective that's nice, but actually I don't really care about that, apart from maybe initial costs that I might consider. But in modeling, that's not that important in my opinion, as long as you don't go for something which we're going for in Y, where in a Y project where we go for the reaction of customers and want to have those in the models as well. So with our causal modeling, so there's something you will need to consider the channels. You will need to consider, okay, is that something that the people might relate to? Next part is, once you have established a customer relationship, how are you going to tend to that customer relationship? Again, that's nice to know, but something that's not that important for a technical model. If you go for a behavior model, again, that's very important. So there you also have to have the trade-offs, what's important for you from a modeling perspective. So the key activities, what do you need to do in order to reach your customer or to serve your customer? This is something that can relate to models to a certain degree, because it will help you to understand the environment in which the model works. So is it necessary to have a lot of maintenance? If it's necessary to have a lot of maintenance in a product, you will have to somehow simulate the degradation of the device until the maintenance, or you will have to simulate that it might be possible that the device will have failures and outtakes. That's something that relates to technical models as well, because you need to consider that, and then you can say, okay, there will be a probability of an outtake, so after a given time, so you need to consider that, and also the costs that are related to that. The key resources This is something in the business model approach that's very internal, business internal. So what are your key resources internally? This is the machines. This is something like patents you're going to need, key people, but it does not necessarily show how they interact with one another. As this is very business internal, it helps you to somehow get a glimpse at the value chain when you see, okay, that we will need some certain outside machines, we will need a connection to the grid, whatever. That's something that will help you there to get a glimpse into that, but it's not that important. So where it's more important and where you will start to understand where it goes into the direction of a value chain, who are your key partners? Who is somebody who you need to work with? Who is somebody who you're dependent on? Who will, who might even help you with your business model? And this is something in models, especially in the results, which you need to consider, because if you start, if you produce results and that start to annoy the key partners, you have to work together. That's something you need to consider. Especially in the field of electricity and energy supply, that's a factor you definitely need to consider because there are many players that are interacting with one another. So here it might help from personal experience to better understand the model. And now we're coming to the two more important parts, which is the cost structure and yeah, so what are the costs people are going to expect within the business model or the thing you're proposing, the value proposition? What are the investment costs? What are the operational costs? Are there any factors for you internally once the sales go up and the sales go down? So this is more of a so this is, again, as I mentioned before, you have to decide on which side you're on when you're doing the business model canvas. If you're going for a company that sells batteries, for instance, or battery storage systems, these are the costs you have when you buy the battery or when you produce the battery, not so much the costs the user has when he buys it. So it's not retail costs, but it's generation costs. On the other hand, if you're making the business model for the single household, then it's the retail price they're going to buy it from. So that's also the point where you have to decide which side you are on when you develop the business model. The revenue stream, on the other hand, is how customers can generate inputs, can generate money, or how you can, as a business, can generate money. Again, here is the question, whose side are you on? Who are you making the business model for? As for a company, how do you get your revenues? I get my revenues from selling better battery storages. So actually, I don't care about if people really have a saving there. If not, it will be bad from a business in the long run because people will say, okay, I bought this expensive storage and it's not better than my old one. But from an initial perspective, you need to consider it. On the other hand, if you're going for the perspective of a customer, then you need to better consider operational costs. So if I've bought the storage for a retail price, how am I going to get back my money for that? So by saving electricity, for instance. So it comes down to whose perspective are you on, and who are you developing the business model for? And once you are, because we have had some people here who are in energy system model, once you go for an energy system model, the business model, you will have to do a lot of business model canvases to get all the perspectives in there. So do you have any questions at this point? Okay, not so far. So I will use the last few minutes to get to 2 points. I will first off show you how economic parameters quite obviously can influence the decision on the PV sizing we've made previously. So I will start sharing my screen again. So you should be able to see the other slides. Amanda, are we good? Brilliant. So it's the same code as before, up to the point where we set some parameters, some economic parameters. So we have a tariff for the in-feed into the grid. So, and we have a tariff for grid consumption, and we have costs for the installation of the PV plant. So the costs for the installation of the PV plant were taken from overview of 2020 for PV costs of different sizes. So I fitted a cost function in there that might work for at least up to 50 kilowatt peak, but for the sake of showing it, it's fine. I've simulated it already. So what you see here is for two different slides with the amortization duration of a PV plant. The first one is with a rather low in-feed tariff of 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So in Austria, at least up until a few months ago, we had very low in-feed tariffs of about 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So there, the optimal sizing would be with the lowest amortization rate of about 18 years, which is approximately, I think, 3 to 4 kilowatt peaks. And this shows very clearly that in Austria, at least with 18 years amortization duration, PV is not yet fit for market without funding, which is why we still have a lot of funding in Austria, because those calculations were made without funding. On the other hand, if you go for the current prices, because electricity market prices are bananas at the moment in Austria, we have an in-feed tariff of 12.6 cents per kilowatt hour, which is even higher than the current funding tariff of 7.6 cents per hour. This is because market prices is so high, and there's one company in Austria which is obliged by law to buy surplus electricity to a market indicated price. And the Austrian regulator releases the market indicated price every quarter of the year, and currently it's at 12.6 cents per kilowatt hour. If it stays that high, we will see. And also it indicates that market prices or retail energy prices will skyrocket in the next few months in Austria. So we're in for quite a ride. But it shows with a simple analysis or a simple introduction of economic parameters, and this is something which from your input in the Mentimeters is something you already did and something you are quite aware of. This is something you know, but it gets more complicated when you consider more technical aspects. So I will start sharing the presentation again and use the last minute to go. I will skip that to the value chain approach. So the value chain approach is more relevant when you're considering an larger ecosystem, like a large energy system where multiple actors will interact with one another. One prime example, if you've heard of energy communities as a new approach of the European Commission to enable end users to share electricity with one another. This is a prime example for where value chains can actually indicate that there is quite a lot of money to gain for energy suppliers. So the problem is, okay, we've got one question in the chat. Okay, Amanda, thank you. So bye, Amanda, thanks. Good luck with the plenary session. So I will keep the channel open for a couple of more minutes, finish off with the value chains, and then leave some room for discussion. So the value chain approach, when it comes to energy communities, the thing is, energy communities allow people to exchange renewable energy over the public grid and let it be accounted as own consumption. So for instance, I have a PV plant and my neighbor does not have one. I can send him my surplus in a very, very easy fashion, theoretically. But for the energy supplier who is not allowed to participate in the energy community approach, this is a problem because he sells less electricity. And in combination with the fact that he has a higher risk of having to account for balancing energy due to bad forecasts of consumption behavior, because consumption behavior is changing once you add renewables into the mix. This is a very unpreferable situation, but it also provides possibilities because an energy community needs to be organized. They need to have an accounting, they need to have a management for their members. So and this is where the ecosystem comes into play. So first of all, okay, the energy retailer might not be able to sell more electricity, but most energy retailers also have a special section for energy services. So here we could generate an additional yield from providing services to an energy community. We can go even further. Most energy suppliers in Austria, at least, also have an electrotechnical bureau which sells PV generators or PV plants or other capacities like storages and stuff like that. So with consideration of, okay, we sell less electricity, this is a problem. But by taking the energy services into the mix, we can provide consultants to energy communities. Within these consultants, of course, we can make upscaling for the energy communities and tell them, okay, if you go for more renewable energies, you will have more internal consumption, but therefore you need additional PV generators, which we could sell you because we're also your service provider and you get a better rate. And also then we introduce storages, electric vehicles, and so on and so forth. So here you will have to consider that what might look like a bad business model in the first place could become a actually great business model once you consider the entire value chain. Again, if the energy supplier says, okay, well, we will sell less electricity, that's fine, but we will offer you a better tariff for the remaining electricity and also a better tariff for maybe surpluses. This will be a measure to keep customers. And this is also something that's of high value, not in terms of euros at the moment, but of a perspective. So these are things that need to be considered when you go for a more holistic system, when you go for large-scale energy systems, that you have to start thinking outside the box. Here, the business model canvas can help, but it's a lot of work because you have to think about, okay, what's the business model for each of those entities within a holding? What's the business approach there? And that's something that takes quite a lot of time, and that should be done before you start modeling, before you start the technical model. Otherwise, you will spend a lot of time doing the technical model. Then you start a discussion about the economic parts, and then you have to rephrase the models you made. We've had that situation a couple of years ago when we did a microgrid model for a direct line system. Direct line is something very peculiar in Austria because it's a point-to-point connection between one energy generator and one consumer. The roles aren't fixed, so they could change if you put a battery storage in the mix, and they are outside the public grid, so they're privately operated and owned. But you can make a star system with one common coupling point and lots of direct lines going different directions. And we've made a technical simulation for that because we tried to implement the battery storage there. And we were done with the technical simulation quite some time ago. And then the discussions about the economic parameters started, and the discussion of who will operate what to what degree and how will we consider that. And we had to rephrase quite a lot of parts of the technical model in order to better suit the operation behind the business model that was developed. So that's just food for thought for you, that you should consider those aspects and that you should take those into account to make more realistic and more relatable models and generate more economically realistic results when doing technical models. So that's it in all shortness. Again, I'm most sorry that I had to rush through all of it in that short time. I hope it was nevertheless of interest for you. And if you have any questions at this point, don't be afraid to ask. If you need any discussion, any more information, just go ahead and ask me. Thank you so much.
So, is there any question for Thomas? No?
Okay. Cruz, do you have any question at this point? Because you were partly co-host, partly listener.
Yes, I was taking a look, and I think that the business canvas approach to modeling, I have done business canvas a lot, but not with this perspective. I think it's quite an interesting perspective to to reach. And the second point that I think it's mostly important, and I think that this has to be stressed, is the perspective of who you are doing the business canvas.
Yeah.
Because it's not, if not all the elements in the value chain have a clear business canvas, profitable and clear business canvas, this is not going to work. And this is an important point, as important or much important than the technical parameters fit.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, since there doesn't seem to be any more questions, some people have already left for the plenary session, and then I just have to say thank you for staying that long, and again, sorry for the delay. And yeah, so good luck with your endeavors, good luck with modeling, good luck with integrating business models in your modeling approach. And yeah, we will have more, I think we're planning in the Y project more skills workshops anyway, so there might also be another time where we go more into details of how to actually include those things and not just the theoretical part.
Yes, thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you for the rest of the person that have participated, and see you on the conference.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.